My mother rejected my scholarship without telling me. She answered the emails herself, typed my name at the bottom, and then sat across from me at dinner and told me that dreams have to bow to family. She said it like it was wisdom. It wasn't wisdom, it was a confession. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the beginning matters, it always does. It was the second week of March, and the light in our kitchen was the specific pale yellow that only exists in early spring mornings when the sun hasn't decided yet if it's going to commit. I was 17 years old, sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal going soft, rereading the email on my laptop for probably the 14th time. The subject line was, "Congratulations, preliminary acceptance, Hargrave International Scholars Program." I had applied 4 months earlier, in secret, not because I was ashamed, because I knew my mother would find a reason to make it about her, and I wanted to hold this one thing close to myself for a little while, before the oxygen got sucked out of it. The program was a full scholarship, tuition, housing, a monthly stipend, at a partner university in Edinburgh, 18 months. Language courses, a research placement, a cohort of other students from 12 countries. It was the kind of opportunity that comes once, if it comes at all. I had a preliminary acceptance. The next step was a confirmation interview with the program coordinator, a Professor Annette Voss, scheduled for the following week. All I had to do was reply to confirm. I closed the laptop when I heard my mother's footsteps on the stairs. Her name is Claudia. I want to be precise about her because she isn't a cartoon villain. She's something more specific and more difficult to explain. She's a woman who learned very early that love and control feel identical when you're afraid, and she never unlearned it. She moved through our house like she owned not just the furniture, but the air. She knew where everything was, including me, especially me. She came into the kitchen and kissed the top of my head and asked if I wanted eggs. Her voice was warm. Her eyes went immediately to my laptop. "What are you working on?" she asked. "Nothing," I said. "Just school stuff." She poured herself coffee. She didn't push. That was the thing about my mother. She rarely pushed directly. She was patient. She preferred to wait until you lowered your guard and then walk through the open door. I told myself I would tell her after the interview, after I had something solid in my hands. That was my first mistake, not the last. The interview with Professor Voss was scheduled for a Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon. I had planned to take the call in my room, door closed, headphones in. I had written notes. I had practiced answers to questions I anticipated. I had done everything right. On Monday evening, my mother found the acceptance email. I didn't know that yet. I found out much later, and I'll get to how. But on Monday evening, she found it. She had a habit of checking my laptop when I left it unattended, a habit she had never mentioned and I had not yet confirmed. And she read it. She read the entire thread. And then she did something that took a specific kind of cold calculation. She did nothing visible. She went to bed. She made me breakfast the next morning. She drove me to school. And while I was in my second period chemistry class, she sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, logged into my email account using the password she had apparently known for some time, and she replied to Professor Voss. She wrote in my name that I was grateful for the preliminary acceptance, but had decided to withdraw my application for personal reasons. She thanked the professor for her time. She signed it with my name. She closed the laptop. She made herself another coffee. I came home that afternoon and took the call that was no longer scheduled. I sat in my room for 40 minutes with my notes in my lap, waiting for a video call that never came. I refreshed my email. Nothing. I checked the spam folder. Nothing. I told myself there had been a technical issue. I told myself I would follow up in the morning. I didn't sleep well that night. My mother knocked on my door at 10 to ask if I wanted chamomile tea. She stood in the doorway with 2 mugs and a soft expression and asked me how my day was. I said fine. She said good. She handed me the tea and went to bed. I held the mug for a long time after she left. It was a white ceramic mug with a small blue flower on the side. I had bought it at a market 2 years earlier because I liked the shape of it. My mother had immediately started using it as her own, and I had let her because that was the path of least resistance. That mug sat on the counter every morning with her fingerprints on it. I drank the tea. I went to sleep. I still didn't know. I found out 11 days later, and it happened because of Professor Voss. The professor sent a second email, not to my main account, to a secondary address I had listed as an alternate contact on the application form, an address I used for academic correspondence and had not thought to hide because I hadn't known I needed to. The email was brief and professional. She wrote that she had received my withdrawal but wanted to reach out personally because my application had been genuinely exceptional and she wanted to make sure I had made the decision freely and with full information. She said the program still had a slot available if I had reconsidered. She said she would hold it for 1 more week. I read that email standing in the school hallway between classes. I read it 3 times. Then I went to the bathroom, locked the stall door, and sat on the closed toilet seat for about 6 minutes doing the specific kind of breathing you do when you're trying not to scream. Withdrawal. I had never sent a withdrawal. I opened my main email account on my phone. I went to the sent folder. There it was, time-stamped 11 days ago at 10:47 in the morning, sent from my account, written in a voice that was almost mine, but not quite, slightly more formal, slightly more apologetic, with a sentence construction I recognized from my mother's text messages. I read the email she had written in my name. I read it twice. Then I took a screenshot. I did not go home and confront her. I want to be clear about that. Every part of me wanted to walk through our front door and put my phone on the kitchen table and watch her face. But I had just enough cold clarity left to understand that if I did that now, with only one screenshot and a shaking voice, she would explain it. She was very good at explaining things. She would find a reason. She would make me feel like I had misunderstood. She would cry. And I would end up apologizing. So I didn't go home. I went to the school library and I started building a file. The login records were the first thing. Our home internet router logged device activity. I knew this because I had set it up 2 years earlier when my mother couldn't figure out why the connection was slow. I had the admin credentials. I logged into the router dashboard from my phone and pulled the activity log for the day the withdrawal email was sent. At 10:31 in the morning, my laptop's MAC address had connected to the network. I was at school at 10:31. I had a signed attendance record to prove it. At 10:49, 2 minutes after the email was sent, the laptop disconnected. I exported the log. I emailed it to myself. I emailed it to the secondary address, the one my mother didn't know about. Then I looked at the email header on the withdrawal message. Email headers are not something most people ever look at, but I had spent time in a coding elective the previous year, and I knew where to find them and what they meant. The header showed the sending device's browser agent. It was a Chrome browser, version 112. My laptop ran Firefox. My mother used Chrome. I took a screenshot of the header. I emailed it to myself. Then I replied to Professor Voss from my secondary address. I explained that I had not sent the withdrawal. I explained that I believed someone had accessed my account without my knowledge. I asked if she could give me a few more days. I told her I was still very much interested in the program. She replied within the hour. She said she would hold the slot. She said she was sorry I was dealing with a difficult situation. She said she looked forward to speaking with me. I sat in the library with my phone on the table and my hands folded in my lap, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness, not yet. Something quieter. The specific feeling of having solid ground under your feet after a long time of not being sure where the floor was. The family dinner happened 2 weeks later. My aunt and uncle were visiting, which meant my mother was performing. She was a different version of herself when there was an audience. Warmer, funnier, more generous, and also more careless, because the audience made her feel safe. She had 2 glasses of wine and became expansive. Someone asked about my plans after graduation. My aunt, I think. She meant it kindly. My mother answered before I could open my mouth. She said I was thinking about the local university, which was a fine school, very close, very practical. She said I was a homebody at heart. She said it with a little laugh, the kind that's meant to sound affectionate, but lands as a verdict. Then she said it. She looked at my aunt and she said, "At the end of the day, dreams have to bow to family. That's just the reality." My uncle nodded. My aunt said something vague about roots. My mother refilled her glass. I was sitting directly across from her. I kept my face very still. I said nothing. I picked up my fork and ate a piece of roasted potato and looked at the tablecloth. She looked at me once, just after she said it. A quick flicker of something, checking whether I had understood, whether I was going to make a scene. I smiled at her, small, calm, closed. She looked away first. After dinner, I helped clear the table. I washed the blue flower mug that had somehow made it to the table as a water glass. I dried it and put it back in the cabinet. I went upstairs and emailed Professor Voss to confirm our rescheduled interview. The interview was in 4 days. The school awards ceremony, the one my mother had been planning to attend for weeks because I was receiving the Academic Achievement Prize, was in 3. I need to tell you about the award ceremony because that's where everything happened, but I need you to understand first what the ceremony meant to my mother. She had been talking about it since January. She had bought a new blouse. She had told her friends, her colleagues, her sister. She had framed it in a very specific way. Her daughter, her sacrifice, her success. She was not wrong that she had sacrificed things. She had. But she had also quietly turned every sacrifice into a debt, and she had been collecting on that debt for years without ever naming it directly. The ceremony was going to be the public ledger, the proof that her way had been right. Our school's awards ceremony was held in the main hall, which was a high-ceilinged room with wooden floors and tall windows and rows of chairs that filled up with parents and teachers and the kind of local officials who like to be photographed next to teenagers holding certificates. The principal gave a speech, the department heads gave speeches, then they called names. My mother sat in the 3rd row with her new blouse and her good posture. She had saved a seat for my aunt. She had her phone ready to take photos. I was sitting with the other award recipients in the front row. My file was in my bag. I had printed everything. The router log, the email header, the original acceptance email, the withdrawal email my mother had sent, and Professor Voss's 2 follow-up messages. I had also printed the email I had sent Professor Voss from my secondary address, and her reply confirming she would hold the slot. I had shown the file to my form teacher, Ms. Brennan, 3 days earlier. I had sat in her office and laid the documents on her desk one by one and explained what each one meant. Ms. Brennan was a small woman with reading glasses she wore on a chain, and the specific kind of patience that comes from 30 years of watching teenagers navigate impossible situations. She read everything. She asked 2 clarifying questions. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me what I wanted to do. I told her. She said she would make sure it happened. They called my name for the Academic Achievement Prize at roughly 20 past 7. I walked up to the front of the hall. The principal shook my hand and gave me the certificate, which was printed on heavy cream paper and had a gold seal on it that felt important even if it wasn't. There was applause. My mother was the loudest person in the room. I could hear her from the stage. The principal asked if I wanted to say a few words. This was not standard. It had been arranged. I said yes. I stepped up to the microphone. The hall settled. I said, "Thank you. I want to share some news because I think this is the right moment and because some of the people in this room should hear it." I paused. I looked at the audience. I found my mother's face in the 3rd row. She was smiling. She thought this was going to be a thank you. I said, 4 months ago, I applied for the Hargreave International Scholars Program. It's a fully funded 18-month academic scholarship at a university in Edinburgh. In March, I received a preliminary acceptance. The room was quiet. My mother's smile was still there, but it had gone slightly rigid, the way a smile does when the face underneath it is starting to receive information it doesn't want. Someone accessed my email account without my permission and sent a withdrawal in my name. I found out through a follow-up message from the program coordinator, Professor Voss, who reached out because she wanted to make sure I had made the decision freely. I did not say my mother's name. I did not need to. Half the people in that room knew our family. The other half would figure it out from her face. I have documentation of the access, I said. Router logs, email headers, timestamps. I've shared them with my teacher. I've also been in contact with Professor Voss directly. And I want to say publicly, so there's no ambiguity, I am accepting the scholarship. I will be going to Edinburgh in September. I picked up my certificate from the podium where I'd set it. I'm grateful for this award. I'm grateful to my teachers, especially Ms. Brennan, and I've learned something important this year about the difference between gratitude and obedience. They're not the same thing. I stepped back from the microphone. The applause started slowly, the way applause does when people are still processing what they've just heard. Then it built. Ms. Brennan was standing. A few other teachers were standing. The students in the front row were looking between me and the 3rd row. My mother was not applauding. My mother was sitting very still in her new blouse, with her phone in her lap, and her face doing something I had never seen it do before. It wasn't anger, it wasn't grief. It was closer to the look of someone who has just realized that the room they thought they controlled has different walls than they thought. My aunt, sitting beside her, put a hand on her arm. My mother pulled her arm away. I came down from the stage and walked back to my seat. I did not look at the 3rd row. I sat down and held my certificate in both hands and looked at the gold seal on the cream paper and breathed. The ceremony continued. 2 more prizes. A closing speech. The hall filled with the sound of chairs scraping back and people standing and the specific low roar of a crowd breaking into smaller conversations. My mother found me near the door. She had composed herself. I'll give her that. Her face was controlled, her voice was low, and she had clearly made the decision to handle this quietly. She put her hand on my arm and said, "We need to talk. Not here." "I know," I said. "What you just did," she started, "was accurate," I said. She looked at me. Her hand tightened slightly on my arm. "You have no idea what you're doing. Edinburgh is 18 months. You're 17 years old. You don't understand what can happen." "I have the documentation," I said. "The router log shows your device connected to my laptop at 10:31 on a Tuesday morning. I was in school. You sent the email at 10:47 using Chrome. I use Firefox. Professor Voss's office has both emails on file." She released my arm. "I'm not angry at you," I said, which was only partially true. "But I'm going," she said very quietly. "I was protecting you." I looked at her for a long moment. She was my mother. She had driven me to every appointment and packed my lunches and sat up with me when I was sick and made chamomile tea at 10 o'clock at night. She had also read my emails without asking, answered them without telling me, and then sat at a dinner table and told me my dreams needed to bow to family while knowing exactly what she had done. "I know you think that," I said. "I think you might even be right, in a way, but it wasn't your decision to make." I walked past her toward the exit. My aunt caught my eye from across the room and gave me a small nod. I nodded back. The weeks between the ceremony and my departure were not clean or easy. I want to be honest about that, because stories that skip from confrontation to resolution are lying to you about what it costs. My mother did not speak to me for 4 days after the ceremony. Not silent treatment silence. She spoke when she had to, in clipped, functional sentences. She cooked dinner. She did laundry. She moved through the house like someone who had been asked to leave, but hadn't found a reason yet. On the 5th day, she came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed and cried, which was harder to navigate than the silence had been. She said she had been afraid. She said she had looked at the acceptance email and felt the floor disappear. She said Edinburgh was so far. She said she didn't know who she was if I wasn't here. I sat beside her and I let her cry. I didn't tell her it was okay because it wasn't. I didn't tell her I forgave her because I wasn't sure yet what that would mean. I said, I know you were scared and you still had no right to do it. She didn't argue. That was something. The following week, she drove me to the passport office to get a renewal. She didn't say much in the car. At one point, she turned the radio on and then turned it off again. When we got to the office, she sat in the waiting area and held her handbag in her lap and looked at the floor. On the drive home, she said, "You'll call?" It wasn't a question. It was the only thing she had left to ask for. "Yes," I said. "I'll call." She nodded. She kept her eyes on the road. I had the confirmation interview with Professor Voss the following Tuesday. I took it in my room with the door closed. My notes were on the desk beside me. The interview lasted 45 minutes. Professor Voss was direct and warm and asked me about my research interests and my reasons for applying and what I hoped to do with the experience. She did not mention the withdrawal or the circumstances. She treated me like a scholar, which was the most disorienting and clarifying thing anyone had done for me in months. At the end, she said, "We're very glad you found your way back to us." I said, "So am I." After the call, I sat at my desk for a while. My room was quiet. I could hear my mother moving around downstairs, the specific sound of her in the kitchen, the cabinet doors, the tap running. Sounds I had heard every day of my life. Sounds I was going to stop hearing in a few months. I thought about what she had said at the dinner table. Dreams have to bow to family. I understood now what she had meant, and I also understood why she was wrong. She hadn't meant that dreams were less important than family. She had meant that her fear was more important than my future. She had dressed the fear up in language about love and sacrifice, and it had worn that costume so long that she couldn't see the difference anymore. I could see it. That was the difference between us. I want to tell you about the morning I left, because it matters. It was a Saturday in early September. My bags were in the hallway. My mother had made breakfast, eggs, toast, the orange juice she bought fresh because she knew I preferred it. She had set the table properly, with placemats and everything. She was doing the things she knew how to do. I sat down and ate. She sat across from me and drank her coffee. The blue flower mug was in front of her. I had left it in the cabinet the night before, or so she thought. We didn't talk much. We talked about the weather in Edinburgh, which I had checked obsessively for weeks. We talked about my winter coat, which she had bought me without asking, and which was a very good coat. Warm and practical and slightly too large, because she had bought it with the idea that I might grow into it over 18 months. I noticed that. I didn't say anything about it. When it was time to go, she stood up and carried my bag to the door. She checked the zipper twice. She handed me my passport from the kitchen counter where she had placed it the night before so I wouldn't forget it. She had put a sticky note on it that said, in her handwriting, "Don't forget." I stood in the doorway with my bag over my shoulder and my passport in my hand and my mother in front of me. And I thought about the last 8 months, the email I had found, the screenshot I had taken in a bathroom stall, the router log, the email header, the file I had built piece by piece, the microphone in the school hall, the look on her face. I thought about all of it. And I thought about the coat that was slightly too large, bought with the idea that I might grow into it. "Mom?" I said. She looked at me. "I'm coming back," I said. "After the 18 months, I'm coming back." She pressed her lips together. She nodded once, quickly, the way you nod when you're trying not to cry in a doorway. "I know the difference," I said. "Between gratitude and obedience. But I know the difference between leaving and abandoning too. I'm leaving. I'm not abandoning." She reached out and straightened the collar of my coat. An old habit. She had been doing it since I was small. "Go," she said, "before you miss your train." I went. I've been in Edinburgh for 7 months now. The city is gray and beautiful and full of wind and the kind of old stone that makes you feel like you're standing inside history. My cohort is 12 people from 9 countries. My research placement is with a linguistics department studying code switching in multilingual communities, which sounds dry until you're in the middle of it and you realize you're watching people navigate identity in real time, which is something I understand personally. I call my mother on Sundays. The calls are not always easy. She asks too many questions about whether I'm eating and whether my room is warm and whether I've made friends, and sometimes I can hear the fear underneath the questions. That particular frequency, but she asks. She doesn't tell me to come home. She doesn't make me feel like my being here is a wound she's sustaining. We are learning, slowly, a different language with each other. One that has room for both of us. I haven't forgiven her completely. I'm not sure complete forgiveness is the right framework for what happened. What she did was a specific kind of violation. Not just of my privacy or my email account, but of my right to make a decision about my own life. She took that right away from me, and she did it quietly. And she would have let me live in the not knowing forever if Professor Voss hadn't sent a second email. I think about Professor Voss a lot. The decision to reach out, the 1-week hold, the assumption that a student who had applied with genuine excellence deserved the chance to confirm her own choice. That one professional courtesy changed my life. I've thanked her for it twice, and she waved it off both times, but I haven't stopped meaning it. I think about the email my mother wrote in my name. I've read it probably 30 times. It's a strange thing. Reading words written by someone else in your voice. She got some things right, The vocabulary is close, the tone is almost right, but there's something off in the rhythm, something that isn't me. And every time I read it, I feel the distance between who she thought I was and who I actually am. That distance is not a wound anymore, it's just a measurement. I brought the blue flower mug with me. I took it from the cabinet the night before I left when my mother was asleep. I wrapped it in a sock and put it in the front pocket of my bag. It was mine originally. She had used it so long it had become hers. Taking it back felt like a statement I couldn't make in words. She sat across from me that last morning with no mug in front of her, and she didn't say anything about it, and I think she understood. It sits on my desk here in Edinburgh. I drink tea from it in the mornings. The city makes sounds that are different from home, different traffic, different birds, different rhythm of people moving through streets. I sit at my desk with the mug and my laptop and my notes, and I think about the girl who sat at a kitchen table in March with a bowl of cereal going soft and an acceptance email she was afraid to share. She was right to be afraid. But she should have been afraid of different things. She should not have been afraid of Edinburgh. She should not have been afraid of Professor Voss, or the interview, or the 18 months, or the distance. She should have been afraid of the very specific damage that comes from letting someone else answer for you, from letting someone else decide what you can handle, from letting someone else write your name at the bottom of a letter that says no. She learned. I learned. My mother lost 3 things that night at the school ceremony. She lost control of the narrative. She lost the ability to pretend she hadn't done what she'd done. And she lost the particular performance she had been planning. The proud mother, the selfless parent, the woman who had given everything. The audience had heard something else. They couldn't unhear it. Her colleagues knew. Her sister knew. The teachers who had watched me grow up for years knew. That is a consequence that doesn't announce itself loudly. It just lives in every room she walks into now, quietly, permanently. There was no dramatic public shaming beyond that hall. She wasn't professionally ruined or cast out of the family. But she went home that night and sat in a house that was about to become entirely her own because I was going to leave it, and she had to live with what she knew about herself. That's the consequence. Not a verdict from a judge, just the truth. With nowhere left to hide it. I don't know what she does with it. That's her work, not mine. My work is here. My work is the linguistics department, and the Sunday calls, and the coat that's slightly too large, and the blue flower mug on the desk, and the email I'm going to send to Professor Voss this afternoon about the preliminary findings for my research placement. My work is the life I didn't let anyone else decide for me. I'm here. My coat is still slightly too large. I'm growing into it. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.